How we doing today, folks? Doing a fuel tune-up, I guess you could call it, on my new 6.9 IDI winter beater. And I get asked questions a lot about the fuel return lines, so I figured while I'm at it, I'd do a video on it. Gonna kind of do a vague overview of a complete tune-up because I got to replace a couple steel hard lines. I got to do the fuel return lines. I'm going to replace the injectors, and I'm going to do the return line O-rings on the injectors. That's part of the return line kit. So first off, I guess I'll start off with the hard lines. I've got a couple on my truck that are bent at an awkward angle that they should not be bent at, and I believe at least one is broken. That's causing it to miss on a cylinder. If you ever have to remove or replace the hard lines, take a picture or mark them so you know exactly where they go. And if you take off the hard lines, these little vibration clamps are very important to put back on. Because if you don't have them on, you can actually snap or crack a line sometimes quickly, sometimes not as quickly, but it can and will break. So I'm going to be replacing those. Then moving on to the return line kit. I just price match from O'Reilly a cheap BWD return line kit. I believe they call it an injector repair kit. I think that's what they call it nowadays. But this is basically what your fuel return line kit or injector repair line kit will come with. You'll have these plastic caps. You'll have right angles and straights. These are the right angles. You can kind of see through the package there. These are the straights. Kind of hard to tell, but they no longer make a single barb return line cap, or if you have a factory turbo truck, the three-way T turbo line cap. Now you can run the return lines in a numerous configurations, as long as the injectors from the passenger side can cross over to the driver's side and, of course, return back to the tank. And next in the kit, they give you these little spring clamps. My preference, I mean, of course, the factory ones held good for 20, 30 years, depending on what truck you got, but my preference, I don't use these clamps. I don't like them. I use these fuel injection line clamps, these band clamps, and this is a 7/16, but it will tighten down and it fits the diameter of the hose almost perfect. So I use those. I've had trouble with getting those to seal over time. Again, that's just a preference. Some guys love these, and you can see there's one on an old set of lines I took off. I just don't like working with them. Next, they give you these O-rings. These are okay to use. These are nitrile based. I run Viton O-rings. Viton, I believe that's how it's said. Typically, go over here to my O-ring bag. You can get them at a hydraulic store. You can get them online. I don't know the exact size off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But they typically come in like this reddish brown, but they can also come in black. I got these at a local hydraulic store, so they can come in either color. These are Viton O-rings. They're a little bit better material, a little bit more heat resistant. That's the biggest problem with the O-rings on top of the injectors. Over time, they like to crack and swell. I'm replacing the injectors as well. I had a spare set from a parts engine. I believe these also came from O'Reilly's, even though previous owner bought them, but they ran less than like 100 miles. Typically, I don't run O'Reilly's injectors just because for the price I can go through R&D, or I've even bought through Accurate Diesel before, but there's other aftermarket options out there that are a little bit better on the price and have a little bit better of a I guess, a reputation as a company. So when you do buy injectors, though, you typically do want to buy in a set, because typically they're pot matched. especially remans. Not always, so it's kind of hit and miss. There's a lot of different people out there making injectors. In your, oh, I forgot to mention that. In your fuel return line kit, you will get these copper washers. Now, if you're not messing with the injectors, you don't got to replace these. But if you take out the injectors, you want to replace these. Because you can see they are a crush seal. They deform after. These were only torqued down probably once, maybe twice. I don't know however many times the previous owner did, but he had them in there less than 100 miles. So these are not reusable. And a little tip, if you do got to replace these, what I do, because you go to put the injector back down in the cylinder head, you can use grease, or you can use, I'm using anise. I anise the threads on all my injectors. You can just put like a dab of grease or a dab of anise on the bottom. You can slide that copper washer on there, and you lift it up. It doesn't fall off. Kind of just a neat, quick little trick. If you go to do copper washers with your return line kit. Moving on. When you do your return line kit, I typically take off the line as a whole. Try to wiggle them off without, these caps can be brittle, so you want to kind of be careful. The caps can be reused. I traditionally don't use them, though. I have on a couple occasions where the discontinued single barb or three-way T cap wasn't available. But on my other truck, I just bought a brass T. So, it's not a must. It's more of a preference of how you want to run your return line routing. But I typically take them off in a section, though, because it just makes it easier. I'm going to pause for a second. Sorry about that. I had a truck coming in. Didn't want any of the background noise to drown out the video. Anyway, I typically take them off in a section because that way when I go to make my new return line, I can just cut it at the same length and distance as this one I pulled off. So it just makes it a little easier for me. You can do it in the truck. I like doing it that way. Next, when you open this up here, you get your caps. You want to look at the inside. You don't want any excess of flash. You want to actually feel it too. You want that, smooth as silk. You don't want anything catching on the O-rings. You don't want to cut the O-rings because, again, you'll have to take the whole thing off, and it can be a pain if you cut or nick an O-ring. When you put these on, I guess I should probably start with how you put the O-rings on. What I typically do is I'll roll the one O-ring onto this first notch here, and then I'll roll the second O-ring over the first one down to the bottom. That just has been the easiest for me to do, and it seems to work. Now, when you go to put these on, you want to make sure you kind of twist them. Yeah, it's hard to do this with one hand, but you want to kind of twist them down, and you'll actually feel and maybe even hear a distinctive click. So, you want to be careful when you're putting these caps on so you don't cut the O-rings. Now, when you go to install the O-rings, you want a lubricant. I typically use diesel fuel. I'll take the cap and I'll dip the cap right in diesel fuel. The whole cap in there. So it's not, I'll dip the cap and I'll take the O-ring. I'll dip the O-ring right in there, and then I'll assemble them on the injectors and then assemble everything. I want everything nice and lubricated. Some people use grease. Some people use Vaseline. I use diesel. This is off-road diesel. I do not run this in my tank. Just what was laying around we use for our track loader. So it's kind of a separate subject, but I don't run the red diesel in my tank because it is untaxed, and if you get caught running that in your tank, it's a very hefty fine. I'm just using it to lubricate some O-rings. Trying to think. Just some basic tools you'll need. 5/8 wrench, hose cutter. If you're using the different style clamps, you'll need a screwdriver. Otherwise, you need a pair of pliers, a 1-inch socket or 1-inch wrench. I believe that's it. I guess I'll go to the truck real quick, and I'll show you how you want to run the turbo line routing. Okay, here I am at the truck. As you can see, there's my hard line that's kind of messed up, and I got some interesting things going on with the return lines. I got some like wire twisted up as a hose clamp. But just another kind of quick little tip. You can see that turbo and the line going under the turbo crosses over to the driver's side. I typically run my crossover a lot farther up just because of the heat. It's given off the turbocharger. Typically, you notice if you have a factory turbo truck or if you've installed the turbo, most of the kits relocate the glow plug controller, the return line, and just moves everything away from that because of the amount of heat generated. So that's, I just wanted to throw that little tip out there. I'm going to move that probably closer up to the front here. And again, it doesn't matter how you run your return line routing as long as it goes from the passenger side to the driver's side and back to the tank. I'm going to delete this this little steel line here because I don't like the olive seals. I'm gonna update it with the 90s barb. It's just a slide-on barb with a clamp that goes at the very back to the tank there. Another thing, this one doesn't have it. On some of the 6.9s, they have the fitting coming off the back of the filter housing to the injector caps. I've mentioned it before in my videos, in my 7.3s I've had. I plug the return line that comes from the filter housing to the injection line clamps, into the injector caps, not clamps, just because it separates my feed from my return system. So if I have bad O-rings, for example, on a cap, it's not going to suck in air into my feed system. Now, that doesn't, I'm not doing that to mask a problem. If I have a fuel leak on a return line cap, I'm going to fix it proper, but I don't want that getting into my feed system and possibly breaking down because of it. So that's just something else I do on all my trucks, just because I've had issues with that, and I've also had issues with the check valve failing in the 7.3 filter heads and causing issues with my electric pump. So that's kind of a big overview of how to do return lines and a little bit about the hard lines. There's similar variations. You don't have to do it exactly how I do it. Just I've had a lot of questions, a lot of people ask, so I thought I'd make a video on it. Anyway, as always, you guys have any quick questions, go ahead and touch base with me. I've been extremely busy lately, so please be patient if it takes a while to get back to you. And till next time.